The sky burned the color of old rust as Elijah Vane rode into the bone-dry edge of Mercy Ridge. Heat shimmered off the clapper roofs like smoke from a dying fire, and the wind rolled in low, whispering secrets across the dust-blown main street. He hadn't meant to stop. He'd only come for feed and a new lantern wick, but something in the air made his knuckles tighten on the reins. There was a crowd gathered outside the saloon. Not the usual row of drunks and card cheats, but a full circle of silent men. No music, no laughter, just the low, scraping voice of a man Elijah hadn't seen in 15 years. The voice rasped out names, starting prices like livestock. Elijah dismounted slowly. His boots crunched across the grit-stained street, each step measured. The air smelled of sun-scorched leather and sour sweat. And there, standing on a broken wagon bed, as if it were a gallows, was Thomas Griggs. He'd aged poorly, jowls sagging, coat stained, one eye clouded like smoke behind a cracked lens. His hand clutched a bottle as tightly as the Bible he used to preach from before the war tore through men like wheat and harvest. 3 strong girls, Griggs slurred. Good for work, good for cooking, ain't married. Yet, let's start with the oldest. Fine hands, quiet tongue. The crowd stayed still. Only the wind moved. Elijah's eyes slid past the father to the girls behind him, lined up like fence posts, each older than the last by perhaps 2 years, none over 20. The eldest kept her eyes down, hands folded as if in prayer. The middle girl stared hard at the crowd, jaw clenched like she wanted to bite someone. But it was the youngest that held Elijah. She didn't look scared or ashamed. She looked furious. Her gaze snapped around the circle, daring someone to speak. I'll give 5 for the oldest. A man called, half-drunk and mean-faced. Another barked 7. Laughter, low and greasy, rippled out. Elijah stepped forward. His coat caught the light. The stitched eagle patch still faded on the shoulder. The sound of his spurs silenced the bids. I'll take all 3. Griggs paused. He squinted. You some sort of fool, Vane. You don't even know what you're buying. I know enough, Elijah said. How much? Griggs huffed. Look at the girls like cattle he regretted slaughtering. $30 for the lot. Elijah drew the coin from a worn pouch, tossed them into the dirt. That your price for blood, Thomas? The father didn't answer, just stepped back, his daughter still frozen, as if movement might trigger something worse. Elijah looked at each of them in turn. You come with me, it's not his property. You'll eat, sleep safe. After that, what you do is yours to choose. The eldest blinked hard. The middle girl said nothing. The youngest spat in the dirt and walked past him like he was dust himself. They rode without speaking. The wagon creaked beneath their weight. Elijah rode beside it, reins loose, gaze scanning the horizon like he always did, watching for memories in the shape of distant riders. By dusk, they reached the ranch. Acres of stubborn grass, a collapsing barn, a house built by better years. The place smelled of ash and old timber. Elijah's son was chopping wood near the well. James Vane was 26, tall like his father, though leaner, quieter. His shirt clung with sweat, and his hands moved with a rhythm that spoke of patience earned, not taught. He stopped only when the wagon groaned into view. Elijah dismounted. They'll be staying, he said, simple as declaring weather. James studied the girls. The youngest held his stare the longest, challenging him, reading him, then discarding him like something dull. Fine, James said. Inside, the house was warm but worn. Elijah offered the eldest a basin and towel. She touched the porcelain like it was silver. The middle one asked for a blade. He handed her a kitchen knife without comment. The youngest didn't ask for anything. She just walked upstairs and chose a room at the end of the hall, the one with the door that stuck and the window that faced west. Dinner was quiet. Cornbread, boiled beans, and strong tea. The eldest, Mara, she whispered her name, ate politely. The middle girl, Lena, picked through her plate like she expected poison. The youngest didn't say her name at all. When asked, she only shrugged. After the meal, Elijah stepped outside. The wind carried the sound of an owl, lonely in the dusk. He lit a cigar and stared toward the stars that hadn't yet shown their faces. James came to stand beside him. What do you plan to do with them? His son asked. Give them choices. That's dangerous, James said. Elijah nodded. So's dying with your name cursed by silence. Behind them, the door creaked. The middle girl stepped onto the porch. Her knife hung at her hip now, fashioned into a belt loop. If you're lying, she said, we'll kill you. I'd expect no less, Elijah replied. She nodded once, then turned back inside. By the time the moon rose, the ranch had changed. A new weight settled in the floorboards. 3 girls carried invisible fire with them. Rage, sorrow, secrets yet unnamed. Elijah felt it. So did James. In her dark room, the youngest girl stared at the sky through the cracked window. She didn't pray, didn't cry, just whispered something too low to hear. And on the horizon, far beyond the hills, a rider turned his horse west, following tracks only the desperate would trace. The days stretched long beneath the prairie sun. Dust rose in golden veils as hooves beat into the earth, and the wind carried with it the memory of things unsaid. Life on the ranch resumed with a quiet rhythm, but nothing was as it had been. The girls did not speak much, but they worked. The eldest, Mara, moved through chores with gentle precision, washing clothes, repairing frayed seams with a care that made the air feel softer around her. Lena, the middle sister, split firewood with James in silence, her arms taut with focus, each strike sharp and angry. The youngest did not take to any one task. She drifted. One day she was mending saddle straps in the barn. The next, she was out beyond the fence line, watching the hills with narrowed eyes, as if waiting for something or someone to appear. James kept his distance. He watched, listened. Where Elijah extended quiet kindness and warned wisdom, James carried suspicion like a second skin. At night, he sometimes stood in the shadow of the barn, staring up at the girl's window. He didn't know her name. She still hadn't offered it. She didn't seem to care whether he asked. Elijah sat with Mara one evening, a bowl of stew growing cold between them. They spoke in fragments, trading more silence than words. She told him of small things, a garden her mother had once kept, the way Lena used to hum when she was nervous. Her voice trembled not from fear, but the effort of speaking things she'd buried. Elijah listened, not as a confessor, but as someone who knew the way to memory. Later that same night, Lena found James repairing a wagon axle beneath the dying light. She didn't speak at first, just watched him work. Then she asked, "What did you do before this?" "Same thing I do now," he replied. "Not possible. You ain't old enough to have always been here." He looked at her, but not fully. Went east for a time. Fought a little. Loved once. That ended. "You ever kill a man?" James tightened the bolt. "Don't ask things you don't want to know." She smirked. Already figured the answer. The next morning, the youngest girl stood in the middle of the corral, watching James break a new horse. The animal thrashed, foam flicking from its mouth, hooves hammering the dirt. James moved like a man built for silence, his commands low, his body loose but sure. She didn't speak until the horse calmed, its breathing slow and steam rising from its flanks. "You treat animals better than people," she said. He wiped sweat from his brow. "Animals don't lie. You don't know me." "I don't want to." "Too bad," she said, and walked away with a grin that held no joy. By noon, Elijah called them all to the long table behind the house. The sun filtered through slats of the porch, striping the worn wood with light. He poured water into a tin cup and waited until the quiet settled around them. "You can leave, any of you," he said. "No strings, no debts. I won't chase you. But if you stay, there's something more to offer." Lena narrowed her eyes. "You want something from us. Don't dress it in kindness." "I want you to survive," Elijah said, "and maybe, if you choose it, build something better." Mara folded her hands. "What are you asking?" "I have a son, a ranch to run, a future that needs hands and hearts." He turned to the youngest, who stared at him without blinking. "If any of you wish it, there's a place here. Not as daughters, not as debt, as wives." James coughed once and looked away, the movement sharp and bitter. The air cracked like dry bark. No one spoke for a long moment. Then the youngest leaned forward, fingers pressed flat on the table. "So we're cattle after all." "No," Elijah said. "You're free. That's the point. Freedom to say yes or no." She stood and walked away, dust trailing behind her like smoke. That night, James found her at the edge of the field where the fence bent inward like a broken limb. She was tossing rocks at a stump, each one hitting dead center. "I don't want to marry anyone," she said without turning, "especially not someone who flinches every time I speak." "I flinch because you aim to wound," he said. She dropped a stone. "That's the only language men ever listen to." "You think my father saved you for a price?" he said, stepping closer. "He didn't. No man saves a girl for nothing. He didn't save you. He gave you space. What you do in it is yours." She turned then, eyes gleaming like polished amber. "The kind you could bleed on. You know what it's like to be sold?" "I know what it's like to be left behind." They stood there, wind tangling the grass around them, a silence full of unshed words. The next morning, Lena found a rifle missing. Tracks led west, thin and scattered. The youngest girl was gone. Elijah saddled up without a word. James joined him. They found her before dusk, crouched near a creek bed, watching for someone who never came. Elijah didn't scold her. He just dismounted, handed her a canteen, and sat nearby. "You expect someone?" he asked. She nodded. "My father owed men. Said he'd sell us to keep them from burning the place. If they think we're dead, they'll come looking for his lies." Elijah looked out over the horizon. "Then we'll be ready." James didn't speak. He watched the whole ride home, something shifting in him like ground after thunder. That night, as the wind howled through the gaps in the barn roof, the youngest girl crept into the kitchen. James was there alone, drying tin cups. "You never asked my name," she said. He set down the cloth. "Didn't think you'd want me to know. I want you to now." She said it softly, like a secret she hadn't meant to keep. "Say it," he said. She did. And when she did, something cracked open in both of them, like ice breaking after a long, hard winter. Neither of them smiled, but they didn't look away. Not this time. The prairie stilled before the storm. Clouds moved low and slow, thick as old smoke, dragging shadows over the land. James felt it first, not in the sky, but in the silence of the animals, the way the birds vanished and the horses shifted without reason. He stood at the fence line, watching the horizon like it might spit out ghosts. Behind him, the wind caught the hem of his coat and flung it like a warning. She came to him in the early dusk, the youngest sister, her name now known, though he hadn't spoken it aloud more than twice. Her boots were muddy, her braid loose. In her hand, a letter crumpled into a fist. "Someone's been asking in Copper Hollow," she said. "About girls. About Griggs. About what happened before." James took the letter and read the scratchy lines. A bartender's note, passed through a trader, then a stable boy. A man wearing a marshal's badge, asking questions too sharp, too precise. "They're not done with us," she said, her voice low. "They weren't after coin. They were after silence. And silence is louder when it disappears." James folded the letter without a word. The barn creaked behind them. A dog barked once in the distance, then nothing. That night, Elijah gathered them by the fire. The sisters sat together, but not touching, old habits of survival hard to unlearn. James leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his shadow dancing behind him. "There's a man coming," Elijah said. "His name's Kane, U.S. Marshal out of Carson Ridge. I knew him once. He doesn't come to talk." Mara looked down. Lena swore under her breath. The youngest said nothing. "He has papers?" James asked. "Maybe. Or maybe just bullets and a Bible." Elijah replied. "Either way, we prepare." "What does he know?" Lena asked, already reaching for the knife she kept laced in her boot. "Enough," the youngest said. "Enough to hang us if we let him." Mara's hand shook slightly. She looked at Elijah. "Can you stop him?" Elijah didn't answer at first. He stared into fire, like it was a past he'd left smoldering. "I can stall him. I can try to turn him back. But justice doesn't bend for stories, only for blood." James stepped forward, firelight cutting across his face. "Then we give him something else. Not lies, not silence, the truth." The youngest laughed once. Sharp. "Truth didn't save my mother." Truth's the only thing that can stand between us and the rope, he said. She tried to run, Mara whispered. Our mother. That night, she told me to get the younger ones out, to meet her in the creek, but she never made it. She didn't fall, Lena said bitterly. He pushed her. No, the youngest said. Her voice was flat. She stabbed him first. He laughed, said he'd make us disappear in pieces. I ended it. The air thickened, heavy with the weight of that sentence. The fire hissed. The wind outside picked up, clawing at the shutters. You saved them, James said quietly. I killed her husband, she replied. That's what Cain will see. And what do you see? Elijah asked. She looked at her sisters, then at James. I see a man who would have broken us all. I see a girl who didn't wait to be broken. Elijah nodded once. Then we'd tell that story. Together. The next morning brought Cain. He rode in slow, like a man not pressed for time. His coat was black, dusty, his hat wide-brimmed and shadowing his face. His badge caught the light. He dismounted without hurry, tied his horse to the post, and knocked twice on the door like it was a formality. Elijah opened it, calm as worn leather. Cain's smile was thin, his eyes pale blue and unreadable. Elijah Vane, he said. It's been a while. Not long enough, Elijah replied. I'm here for the Griggs girls. Alive or buried. I've got 3 women here who work this ranch. They've names and minds of their own. They'll speak for themselves. Cain nodded slowly. I've got papers. Witness testimony. A sheriff's warrant. Their father's sworn statement. He sold them like mules. He said they slit their mother's throat in her sleep. James stepped into the doorway. Cain looked him over. You his boy? The marshal asked. I am. Then I'd keep your hands clean. Ain't no future in fighting for ghosts. We don't bury ghosts here, James said. Cain smiled again like something stretched too thin. You've got till sundown. After that, I bring men. He turned and left without another word. As his horse faded into the hills, Elijah looked at his son and the girls. We fight, Lena asked. Only if we must, Elijah said. But if he returns, he won't come alone. Then we ride, Lena said. No, the youngest answered. We stand. She turned to James. You said the truth was enough. Prove it. He nodded. We testify. At dusk, as the sun painted the land in fire and bone, they stood together beneath the wind-scoured sky. Elijah wrote the names. The girls spoke the rest. When the darkness came, they were ready. And Cain was not alone. They saw the rider before they heard them. Shadows on the ridge. Horses silhouetted against the last burn of daylight. 5 men rode behind Cain, their coats flaring in the wind like funeral flags. They didn't come fast. They didn't need to. This was meant to be final. James stood beside the barn, rifle slung across his chest. The youngest girl, now named and unafraid, was at his side, a pistol tucked into her skirt. She hadn't spoken since morning, not with words. But everything in the way she moved said she was ready. Lena stood behind the main gate, crouched low, shotgun resting on her knee. Mara waited in the house, her hands trembling slightly as she packed the last of the medical supplies into a canvas bag. Elijah sat on the porch with his old rifle laid across his lap, the barrel clean to a shine. His eyes were distant, not afraid, just tired of death finding him no matter where he built walls. Cain rode to the front of the house and stopped. His men fanned out behind him like vultures circling an open wound. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of sweat, horses, and coming rain. Elijah, Cain called, voice level. You had your time to make peace. Now it's law's turn. Elijah rose slowly. Law without mercy ain't justice. It's just another man's noose. You shelter confessed murderers. I shelter survivors. Cain dismounted. His boots hit the dirt like hammer strikes. He drew the paper from his coat and held it high. By order of the Federal Circuit, these girls are to be taken into custody and brought to stand trial in Carson Ridge. You interfere, you join them. Then we stand with them, James said, stepping into the open. The youngest girl stepped forward too. Her voice rang out clear. My name is not Griggs. I left that name in blood. I'm not a fugitive. I'm a girl who killed a monster to keep her sisters breathing. You want to hang me? You'll have to look me in the eyes while you do it." Cain blinked once. His hand hovered near his belt. One of his deputies shifted in the saddle, the kind of shift that said he was reaching for a rifle. It happened fast. James raised his weapon first, but Cain moved quicker. Shot cracked to the evening, and Elijah staggered backward, hit in the shoulder, his rifle clattering to the porch. The world exploded into motion. Lena's shotgun roared, dropping one of Cain's men clean off his horse. James fired twice and ducked behind the well. The youngest girl dropped low, crawling through the dust with her pistol clutched tight. Cain shouted, "Hold them! Hold them!" But the men were breaking, too scattered wide, flanking the barn, while the last deputy took aim at the house. Inside, Mara pulled the eldest rifle from beneath the table and fired through the window, glass shattering like brittle ice. Her shot went wide, but it sent the man ducking. The youngest reached the side of the porch, breath ragged, blood in her mouth from biting her tongue. Elijah was down but conscious, pressing his hand to the wound, teeth gritted. Cain moved toward him, gun still raised. "Should have stayed dead in Tennessee," he muttered. Before he could pull the trigger, James tackled him from behind, the two men slamming into the dirt in a cloud of dust and hate. The gun skidded across the ground. Cain fought like a man born to violence, elbows, fists, knees. But James was younger, angrier, and when he got his hands around Cain's throat, the marshal's pale eyes went wide with something like fear. A shot rang out. Everyone froze. Cain collapsed backward, bleeding from the gut. The youngest girl stood a few feet away, her pistol trembling in both hands. Her breath came in shallow gasps. "I told you," she whispered, "you'd have to look at me." Cain's eyes rolled. He died slowly, sand sticking to the blood on his lips. The last two deputies dropped their weapons and rode off without another word. It took nearly half an hour for the dust to settle and the silence to feel real again. They buried the bodies at night, in the back field where the soil was soft and the wind blew steady. No markers, no prayers, just earth returning what it had briefly loaned. Elijah's wound wasn't deep, but it would leave a scar. He insisted on walking inside on his own, leaning on James only when no one was looking. Mara stitched him up, quiet and efficient, her eyes never leaving the thread. Lena disappeared for a while, took a horse and rode out into the dusk alone. She returned by morning with a bag full of bullets and a new look in her eyes. No longer running, no longer hiding. James and the youngest girl stood by the fire before dawn. She held her pistol like a relic, the metal blackened by heat and memory. "You'll have to bury that too," James said. "Not yet," she replied. "Not until I forget what it felt like." "You don't have to marry me," he said suddenly. "Not because of all this. Not because of him." She looked at him, her expression unreadable in the firelight. "I know," she said, "but I want to." They married in the old barn chapel the next week. The beam still leaned. The pews were just benches. But Mara wept and Elijah smiled through his bruises, and even Lena stood still, hand resting on her shotgun like a witness giving oath. Life on the ranch continued, slowly, quietly, but with purpose now. Elijah spent more time sitting on the porch, watching the wind move through the tall grass like a memory try and forget itself. Mara planted wildflowers around the graves. Lena took up patrol, never said what she was looking for, only that she'd know it when it came. The youngest girl, now a woman and no longer unnamed, slept without nightmares for the first time in years. And beside her, James slept too, hand resting always near hers, as if to say, "I'm here, still standing." And far off, beyond the hills where Cain once rode, the land held its breath. It would remember. It always did. But this time, it would remember something new. Not just blood, not just ruin, but choice, and a name that wasn't borrowed from pain.